back, so I will call this special meeting of the Fargo Board of Education to order. Thank you all for being here tonight and making extra time for this. I'd like to start by just reading the memo that I released to the board, mostly because I think it's a really nice summary of events and it's a nice timeline of what got us here today to have this rediscussion. And then I will make a few comments.
President Newman,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Can we have an approval of the agenda real
Oh,
fast?
we can do that.
Thank you.
Yes. So I would look for approval of the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Robin, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Nikki. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, which is the only item on our agenda. And again, I was going to start by just reading memo number 14, which reads, at the February 8th board meeting, board member David Paulson added an agenda item to the business section regarding the Pledge of Allegiance. He moved to begin each regularly scheduled meeting of the Fargo Board of Education with the Pledge of Allegiance led by the president immediately following the call to order. The motion failed due to a lack of a second. David Paulson asked for the governance committee to discuss adding an agenda item to a board meeting on adding the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of each regular board meeting agenda. At the February 24th governance committee meeting, consensus was reached to add the item to the March 22nd meeting under business. At the March 22nd meeting, the motion to begin each regularly scheduled meeting of the Fargo Board of Education with the Pledge of Allegiance immediately following the call to order passed. The Pledge of Allegiance has been cited at each regular board meeting since, specifically April 12th, April 26th, May 10th, May 24th, June 14th, June 28th, July 12th, and August 9th at our regular meetings. Board member Seth Holden asked for the governance committee to discuss adding an agenda item to a board meeting on the Pledge of Allegiance, seeking to rescind the previous action. At our July 28th governance committee meeting, consensus was reached to add the item to the August 9th meeting under business. At the August 9th board meeting, a motion to rescind the action taken on the March 22nd board meeting to begin each regularly scheduled meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance immediately following the call to order passed. So since the August 9th board meeting, board members and the district have received significant negative local and national feedback on the decision not to say the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of our board's regular meetings, appropriating time and resources from other district responsibilities. Further, a considerate amount of misinformation has been shared about the action and its reach into procedures in our schools. The Board of Education's action on its August 9th meeting did not impact the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance in our school buildings by students and staff, nor did it change our recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance to remove the words "under God." The action taken at the meeting was not to negate the board's support of patriotism, the love of one's country, or the support of the flag of the United States. However, the amount of feedback has made it evident that correcting motions to comprehensively reflect board decision will divert even more staff and board time and resources away from preparing for the start of the 2022-2023 school year. Therefore, as permissible per GP 2E, I am calling a special meeting of the Board of Education to discuss the impact of our previous decision and what it has meant to our district, its operations, and its image. So since the August 9th meeting, I have done my best to respond to as many constituents as possible. This special meeting has been called in response to the meaningful conversations that I and my fellow board members have had with parents and members of the Fargo School District. Many have discussed with us how much it means to them to hear their Board of Education recite the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of our meetings. To these individuals, I thank you for sharing your stories, for your time, respect, and your civility. This special meeting has not been called in response to the threatening, hateful, lewd, vile, and racist emails and voicemails that have been received. Fargo Public Schools has a zero tolerance policy around bullying, and likewise, this behavior will not be tolerated or accepted by this board. It has come to my attention that in addition to myself, many school board members have received excessive threats, and 3 have discussed with me potentially filing police reports for their safety. We know that local and national law enforcement entities are aware of the threats and the situation. I have also been made aware of the unsustainable time demands this has placed on our district administration and staff. The volume of correspondence has required 3 to 4 staff members to around the clock do nothing but attempt to address this issue and try to respond. There was also a 2-day period of time where Fargo Public Schools was unable to answer the phones. This is unacceptable to us as a board the week prior to school starting. There could be families calling to register their children or calling with questions regarding back to school. We must be available to them. That is our priority as a school board and as a district. With that, I would like to move that we reinstate beginning each regularly scheduled meeting of the Fargo Board of Education with the Pledge of Allegiance immediately following the call to order. I would look for a second to allow for further discussion. Thank you.
I will second that.
Seconded by Robin. Any discussion? Yes, Greg.
I don't have anything to add about the disruptive stuff that's been going on. I think you covered that nicely. But I do have a couple interesting pieces of data I'd like to share, as well as an apology to make. We have received a lot of messages in regards to our vote last Tuesday. Hundreds of messages, mostly in disagreement with our decision. It took a lot of time, but I did read everything that hit my inbox. And I noticed a few trends in the emails and calls I was receiving. So, like anyone who works in Microsoft Excel professionally, I started tracking some of the data. And as of the last time I checked, only 19% of the messages I received were from Fargo residents. That means more than 4 of every 5 messages came from people who I was not elected to represent. And of those that did come from Fargo, 43%, nearly half, were in support of this board's decision. And I'd also really want to point out that the messages from Fargo, including those that were critical of this board's decision, were by and large far more civil than those messages coming from outside our community. So while this past week I've been threatened with violence and called every name in the book, my belief in the goodness of Fargo's citizens has not been shaken. And now I'd like to apologize to those good people of Fargo for what I am about to do. In a few minutes, I'm going to vote to reinstate the Pledge of Allegiance here, having been directly influenced by people I was not elected to represent. But I hope you'll forgive me, because I truly believe it is in the best interest of our schools to do so. The disruptions and the threats must end so that we can have a successful start to our school year.
Thank you, Greg. Any other comments from board members? Namal, were you? Namal, thank you.
I want to say thank you to the board. Thank you to the community that are at home listening today. Thank you to all of you that show up today because you want to support the motion. I am the first woman ever been elected in City of Fargo as a Black woman and in other office in Fargo. Since the Fargo was Fargo was founded in 1871 or 74, somewhere there, like 121 something years ago. Not a Black woman I have ever sat here or to represent at all. The thing that I have Fargo has been my home for the last 16 years or so. I attended NDSU. I made great friends. Some are wonderful family. And what they taught me is you have to stand up for what you believe in. And that I believe that's what most of you Americans do. You have to believe it in your heart. So I'm going to say something here. This board started saying the pledge around 4 months ago. It isn't a long-standing tradition that you're actually saying. Whether we say it or not, it does not impact what happened in each meeting. We will always make decisions we believe are in the best interest of our children, our teachers, the staff that make our schools some of the greatest in this country. In the democracy, we can expect and should value disagreement, discussion over idea, decision, and policy. However, the response to this decision has not been discussed. It has mostly been hate. Hate has no place in this Fargo community, I can tell you that. And I will not tolerate it myself. It does not make a strong democracy. It's only tear down the nations. What you just did is unacceptable. I want to share some of the messages that I have received. Therefore, unfortunately, these are representative of 100 of emails and voicemail I received over the past week. And I hope you can hear some of it. I know it might be scary, but I think that is good that you can hear it yourself.
Should have figured a black motherfucker wouldn't vote for the Pledge of Allegiance before school. Listen, jackass, you weren't a slave. Nobody you know was a fucking slave. And nobody alive owned a fucking slave. But you don't like the Pledge of Allegiance because it hurts your little black feelings. Oh, you're a cunt. Fucking fascist, fucking Nazi. And now you are marked.
The reason why I'm saying this is because I know this country is not found in the principle like this. Yes, there is a history of bigotry, discrimination about Black people, Native American, and so many different colors. It's very hard for us to speak up because when you speak up, what happened? You get called the N-words, everything, you name it. And I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to be respected because I have the experience to be in these communities and to make sure that I represent all those people who voted for me. And I bet you majority of you who voted for me did not call me. And majority of you people who actually didn't vote for me are the one that name calling me and so many more. Just compare about all those students that are in Fargo Public School, hearing that, them being called the N-word, not making better choices because they feel like they are scared, because they feel like they don't belong here. Anyway, in summary, I'm saying the pledge at our meeting is not long-standing. It has been happening for 4 months. No matter what we decided, it wouldn't change how much we care for our students, our teachers, our staff, and our district. It wouldn't change the decision. However, the response has been almost entirely hateful, somewhere positive, because after the forms was sent out, I got a lot of emails of support. Almost half of them are really wonderful and supportive of me. If we go back on our decision now, we will be bending to hate. We wouldn't be rewarding our children or our students in our district for acting in this way. We should not in this case either. It will only encourage us, this strategy on the future issues. I understand it's not easy to make this decision, but know that this moment will pass. Let's get back to the work that we are elected to do, and that is to find a solution to our teacher shortages, mental health issues, academic achievement for our students, and to make our district a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Namal. I appreciate you sharing that. Any other board members like to make comments? Seth?
I also, Greg, would like to start with an apology. I want to apologize to my fellow board members and cabinet and all the other staff for what they've had to endure over the past week. I, under no circumstances, will ever be apologetic for my morals or my principles or the things that I stand for. But it breaks my heart to know that people I care about have suffered by any action I may have taken. It also breaks my heart to read and to listen to the things that I've read and the things that I've heard and the things that I've just heard minutes ago. When to hear those things and to read those things, it really embarrasses me and disappoints me that we've come to this as a society. When I say that I love my country, most of that love is directed towards the people. And to see so many people act this way is absolutely heartbreaking. When thinking about some of the things that have transpired this past week, a lot of concerns have come to my mind. A lot of those concerns have really just been brought to life questions that I don't know if I have the answers to. I'm obviously very concerned about the image of our district right now. But I'm wondering if reinstating will change that image or not. I guess that's something that can only be seen depending on action. I'm always 100% concerned about the constant effort to dismantle public education, but I'm also not sure if going back on our decision will stop that effort. In fact, I'm pretty sure it 100% will not. A couple of things I'm also concerned about what might happen to this board in the future, because we're going to have to probably be prepared to take more heat than we normally do for decisions that we make, because there may be a perception of success. And I'm also concerned about the lessons that we're teaching our children, that it's okay to do this, to act this way, to say these things to people, to treat people this way. I don't think that's a lesson that's important to teach our children. I completely stand firm in the words that I said on August 9th concerning this. But as we've all seen over the past week, we are definitely, and our president has said this before, we are in a war of misinformation. And there is a war on truth right now, and a war on decency and how we treat each other. And I think most importantly for the 9 of us, there's a war on public education. And the question that I'm struggling with in my head that has gone on in the past week is, do you concede the battle to win the war? And those are just the thoughts that I've had over the past week, and I just wanted to share with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Seth. Melissa?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Newman. Just also want to start with an apology, mostly to Namal. I'm sorry that you've had any negative communication this week, particularly something as damaging and hateful and unconscionable as what you've suffered. So I am sorry. I also want to echo what Greg suggested, and is that the much smaller percentage of communication we've received from our beloved Fargo citizens have been thoughtful and respectful, and on both sides truly supporting the decision to stop saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and then also encouraging us to reinstate it. My vote on August 9th was made with three principles in mind. It was first that I believed a local governing board's decision as to how it began its meetings was uniquely in the hands of its 9 duly elected members. Precedent also informed my decision, and in this board's modern history, this was not a practice until April of this year. Second, and somewhat relatedly, my vote was absolutely not a commentary on the Pledge of Allegiance in classrooms, and I firmly believe that any motion related to a classroom would be completely inappropriate and antithetical to our board's policy form of governance. And finally, as I stated on August 9th, and I know we all share this love, I love my country, and I love it so much, I became its lawyer, and the United States of America is my one and only client. I have never thought the pledge was the only or even best way of expressing your love for your country, and I still believe that. But now I understand that the optics of this decision were quite frankly terrible. More significantly, the vote incited an onslaught of communications directed to Fargo Public Schools staff to such a degree that it incapacitated them from doing their general duties and supporting the district's work. I now firmly understand that my August 9th vote was not in the best interest of the district and in fact harmed the district. Thoughtful constituents have also pointed out that regardless of your personal feelings on the Pledge of Allegiance, reciting it is honoring a democracy that makes a strong public education system possible, and that's critically important right now to me. To the constituents who've reached out in numerous numbers and encouraged us to stand by the original vote, and even suggesting that changing is a weakness, I appreciate your thoughts. I deeply understand them, but I respectfully disagree with you. To me, reflective leadership is the ability to acknowledge the shortcomings of your original decision, compromise when necessary, particularly on a non-substantive decision such as this one, and lay to rest a controversy so we can move forward and start focusing on the very important work we have before us. Supporting our students and support to the district is the only priority I have this evening, and so I will be supporting President Newman's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Jim?
Thank you, President Newman. I guess I want to explain how I too am going to make a decision based upon what I believe my role as a school board member is, not my role as a U.S. citizen. The Establishment Clause is really what created the issue that's in front of us today. Theoretically, Congress can make no law to promote or prohibit the exercise of free religion. Obviously, I think that same premise applies to all subdivisions outside of Congress, state legislatures, city commissions, school boards, etc. Many, many years before anybody in this room was born, a Baptist minister decided to write what later became known as the Pledge of Allegiance. Interestingly enough, this Baptist minister did not put the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance as he submitted it. In 1952, the Knights of Columbus, a Catholic fraternal organization, began a petition drive to modify the words of the Pledge of Allegiance to add "under God." To those of you that have been kind enough to share your thoughts with us and have referenced the fact that you do not believe the God referenced in the Pledge of Allegiance is the Judeo-Christian God, I would recommend that you actually look at the history of how it came to be. And I appreciate the thought that we should make it inclusive to all other religions. But I do not believe the intent that was passed in 1954 by the Congress and signed by President Eisenhower was to represent anything besides the Judeo-Christian God. It was, of course, challenged in court whether you could make students in public education recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And while the court originally said, no, you can't, it ultimately at the Supreme Court was decided that, yes, you can have the Pledge of Allegiance recited in classrooms, but you cannot require any student to stand or recite it. And if they would prefer to leave the words "under God" out, that is perfectly acceptable as well. Now, I am not a Supreme Court justice, but I do understand somewhat what constitutional law would say, and I would believe that would be considered a punt at best to the judicial process. I flat out disagree that reciting the Pledge of Allegiance does not, with the words "under God," promote the establishment of religion. I think it clearly does. And if you could explain to me how a kindergartner, a sixth grader, a seventh grader would understand that they could not recite it with the rest of their class, or they could leave out those two words that the Supreme Court said, then you would probably have an agreement with the philosophy I have as a person. All of that being said, every opportunity I have in any environment where the Pledge of Allegiance is said, I will certainly stand and say it. I have nothing but respect for this country, and I'm a Presbyterian and do believe in God. That being said, I do not believe it really does meet the test of the Establishment Clause. So personally, I think the decision we made to no longer say it was the appropriate decision. And those of you that want to send me more hate email, feel free to do it. But, and I think you said it correctly, Seth, do we concede a battle for the ultimate win? And the ultimate win for me as a school board member is to protect this district and its students every day, every hour, every minute. And to that extent, I will be voting for President Newman's motion as well, even though philosophically I disagree with it.
Thank you, Jim, for those comments. Anyone else? Katie Christensen is joining us on Zoom. I don't want to forget about you.
Yeah, I do have a few things to say. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, I wanted to share briefly that I decided to seek a seat on the Fargo Board of Education because I believe that the right to a free and public education is one of the most valuable rights that we have. As a US citizen, I'm proud that our schools welcome and embrace all children, regardless of their race, their religion, their gender, or their background. Obviously, it's well known that on August 9th, this board voted to discontinue saying the pledge. Even though we had only been saying it since April, I feel like that seemed to be lost when you look at all the different communications and the media that we've received around this. Our Board of Education did function successfully for decades without the Pledge of Allegiance. And there are many school boards, even within our state and in the region, that still do that. But yet we became the recipients of such hateful messages. Since then, I have been called a pig, a racist, and a godless pervert. I've received voicemails with words that I'm not going to share aloud in the meeting. I've been told that I will rot someday and that I inflict harm on children. I've been told to leave the country. I've been asked about my personal religious beliefs as if that has any impact on my ability to serve in this public role. And I did decide to file a police report with 7 emails and 1 voicemail that I felt were just pure hatred. Throughout all of this, though, I keep wondering, I keep feeling like, what if the passion and the attention were equal for our actual schools? Like, what if we felt equally outraged or passionate about our teachers being underpaid, or that this profession is undervalued? What about our concern for teacher burnout? And what about in North Dakota right now, there is a very real childcare shortage, which impacts workers, including teachers' abilities to work. And I wish that our attention would focus on these areas and not on this one highly divisive area, the Pledge of Allegiance. And so for those of you that have provided the constructive and meaningful feedback to me, I thank you. Regardless of tonight's outcome, I hope that we can shift our attention and passion back to our students, our teachers, and our staff. And I would echo the sentiments of many of my colleagues that we are here to do what's best for our district, to protect our teachers, our students, and our staff, and to set everyone up for a very successful year. And that is what I will be thinking when we take this vote here shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate you joining us from afar. Any other board members like to speak? Going once. Any further discussion this evening? Okay, if not, there's a motion on the floor that has been seconded to reinstate beginning each regularly scheduled meeting of the Fargo Board of Education with the Pledge of Allegiance immediately following the call to order. Anne Marie, I'll have you call the roll.
Gullickson? Yes. Holden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Berkland?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
Day?
No.
Newman?
Yes, motion passes. Thank you, and with that, we are adjourned.